Hey, what is up, guys? It's Count Chocula back again with another Marvel Heroes cosmic build. This time, I'm going to be talking about the Juggernaut.
Don't you know who I am? I'm the Juggernaut, bitch!
No, not that lousy ass Juggernaut from the terrible X-Men 3 movie. What was it called? X-Men The Last Stand or some crap like that, where they actually put what's his name, Vinnie Jones, an ex British soccer star, as the Juggernaut, and they totally fucked it up. I mean, how do you screw up the Juggernaut? Everybody likes the Juggernaut. He's one of the coolest Marvel villains, or I mean, sometimes he's a hero when he's with the Thunderbolts or whatever, but I mean, that was pathetic. And they actually made him a mutant in the movie. I mean, Juggernaut is not a mutant, okay? It's a guy that found the Crimson Crystal of Cyttorak. His powers are based on magic. So, but anyway, I'm not making this video to talk about that lousy movie. I could go on about that lousy movie though, but maybe it's best we just forget that movie even exists, and let's go ahead and talk about the Juggernaut and the Juggernaut's powers. So anyway, I do have as you can see right here, I am wearing the Juggernaut Fear Itself costume, where you can purchase in the store. And plus, the costume just looks really cool. It's, the Fear Itself. It's pretty much a must-have if you're going to be playing the Juggernaut. And it does change some of the animation, especially the big elbow drop. Movement power. So anyway, let's get into the cosmic build here. So I'll bring up the power tree, and we'll go ahead and I'll go ahead and reset the powers like I always do. So we'll go ahead and reset the powers, and I'll empty out the bar. Now, Juggernaut's got 3 trees. He's got the Mystical Powerhouse, he's got the Unstoppable, and he's got Avatar of Cyttorak. So we'll start off here with Mystical Powerhouse tree, and I only use one ability from this entire tree. Now, Juggernaut is entirely melee. There's no good range abilities for Juggernaut. I mean, he's got a little bit of area attack, decent AOE, but he's more based on a single strike. I mean, it'll do damage to multiple targets, but you're wanting to get a decent crit or a decent brutal out of the attack. So I'm going to go ahead and max out this move, which is called Lariat. It's a basic melee movement, and it's Juggernaut's all physical damage. That's all he is. There's no hybrid build here. He's all physical damage with movement powers. So anything you can do to buff your movement powers or buff your physical damage is a good thing for Juggernaut. But what this does is physical damage restores 5% of your maximum momentum. And I'll talk about momentum later. Juggernaut uses kind of a unique resource called, naturally momentum. So anyway, it says when you hit with this power, the damage rating is plus 273 to movement powers, tenacity plus 316. I'll talk about tenacity and Juggernaut a little bit. And the buff duration is 8 seconds, and the effect stacks up to 3 times. So I go ahead and put this on my right mouse button. And I really don't use this power a lot. Basically, I use this power because it restores 5% of your maximum momentum, but that's not the main way that I restore his resource. But I do use this ability. I don't use it a lot. I just kind of use it. I use it when there's a mob around and I have to keep attacking. I'll go ahead and just hit maybe 2 or 3 times with the Lariat move. and it'll build a little bit. It does a little bit of damage, and it'll build a little bit of your momentum back. But it's not the main way to recharge your momentum. So let's go over to the unstoppable tree here, and we have a passive that we're going to be using. It's called Can't Be Stopped. Now, we're not going to put this on the bar, but we are going to use it for the passive effects. It gives you a plus damage rating, gives you plus critical rating for 10 seconds when you use a power, and the critical rating is equal to 75% of your tenacity rating. So I think Juggernaut, maybe, tenacity equals, crit rating, basically, for Juggernaut, if you have points into Can't Be Stopped. So I go ahead and max these points out. Plus, it gives you extra tenacity. Gives me extra plus 1,119. It also your movement speed increases as you gain momentum, up to 150 more movement speed at maximum momentum. The active effect is a crowd control, but I don't use it on the bar. I don't use it for the active effect. I just use this for the passive. So I go ahead and max out Can't Be Stopped. Like I said, we don't have to worry about putting that on the bar. Next is Big Elbow Drop. This is your main move for Juggernaut. This is what you're going to be spamming. There's no cooldown on this move. It's a melee area, and it's also a movement ability. It's physical damage. It has a knockdown. It knocks down enemies. It says knockdown duration 5.9 seconds. It spends all of your momentum to increase damage by 4% per 10 momentum spent. So you really want to have your momentum bar full or near full when you're using this, at least more than half. But it takes a little bit of time to recharge momentum, because you're not going to be able to spam it over and over and get the maximum effect. I mean, you can spam this move and it'll do decent damage, but if you really want to pop off the big crits, the big brutal strikes, you want to have your momentum at maximum when you do this move. And it, like I said, it's an area move as well. It's going to hit all the enemies in a small little area. So I go ahead and confirm that, put that on my bar. Next is Stride. This is very important. Normally the movement ability for a character is just kind of an afterthought. It's not really necessary on your bar, but with Juggernaut, I think it's a very necessary move. And I go ahead and max this movement out. And the reason why is this is the fastest way to recharge your momentum. And I put this on my left mouse button, and I'll be using this a lot. And it says run forward at high speed, moving through enemies and building momentum quickly. It restores 34.5% of your maximum momentum per second while channeling. So you really want to max this ability out. Every time that you do your elbow drop, you want to go ahead and hit Stride. If you want to keep attacking, because Stride doesn't do any damage, it just increases your travel speed and restores momentum. That's all it's used for. It doesn't actually do any kind of damage. If you want to continue doing damage and build momentum more slowly, you want to use Lariat. So I put that down there. I put that on my left. I put Stride on my left mouse button. Next will be Juggernaut's signature, which is Unstoppable Charge. And I go ahead and max this out as well. And this is a really good move. You just basically you always want to be using this in against big mobs or bosses or whatever. This is also a big damaging ability. I'm going to put that down on my bar. It's a signature, melee, area, and movement. It does 294,000 twice per second. The active duration is 6 seconds. You cannot affect this by boosting your power duration. You're also immune to crowd control effects. It does have a 45-second cooldown. But you do get the power synergy with your ultimate ability, plus 1% damage for every point you have in full power. Right now, I have 11 points in my full power, so I get a plus 11% damage on my signature. And it's a really good signature. It's pretty cool too. You just kind of, I'll show it later after I get the build complete. And that's all I use. Let me double check that. That is all I use in the Unstoppable tree. Now next is the Avatar of Sidorak tree. Crimson Force Field. So you can see I have 67 points left. Crimson Force Field. I'm going to go ahead and max that out as well. This is just a shield, but it also has a passive effect. Just gives you damage reduction plus 8%, defense rating, deflect, and you regenerate 588 health per second. And vulnerability activates automatically on defeat. The cooldown is 3.1 minutes. The active effect is maximum health is boosted. Your invulnerability is 3.8 seconds. It's got a 20-second cooldown. So I go ahead and put that on my bar. And I've got 47 points left. And the next one is Human Juggernaut, and it's a toggle. And I'm going to go ahead and max that out as well. And we will always keep that toggled and keep that activated. You want to go ahead and hit it while it's on the bar. You'll know it's toggled on when you have the orange border around the whichever slot you put it in. I put it in the 7 slot. What Human Juggernaut does is it increases the rate your momentum builds. It says utilize the gifts of the Crimson Cosmos given to you, becoming an unstoppable force of destruction. Activating this toggle will deactivate other toggles. Gives you damage rating, and it gives you plus damage rating to movement powers. And the big thing is big elbow drops bonus damage from momentum is increased by 25%. So that's huge. So that's the reason why you want that on your bar. You want to keep that activated. Moving on, I also use Don't You Know Who I Am? And this is basically a taunt, and it's a debuff. It also enemies deal 10% damage for 5 seconds. It's just an area taunt and an area debuff. It also has a passive effect that you and your allies gain toughness, increasing defense rating, and maximum health. I just bumped into my microphone there. So what I do is I don't max this out. I don't max out Don't You Know Who I Am. I just put whatever points left over. I put them in that. So let me just put 1 point in that and confirm it. And last but not least here is the bottom power here is Scion of Sidorak. And I maxed out Scion of Sidorak, and it is a buff. Let me put this, and this is a move. I also have to put Don't You Know Who I Am, since I do use the active effect for the taunt and the debuff. I go ahead and put that on my bar as well. Scion of Sidorak. It says Dawn the true unconquerable power of Sidorak, gaining immeasurable power. This is a move you always want on cooldown. It's basically your buff, similar to like Raging Cajun for Gambit. Like I said, always have this up. There's no downside to having it up. What you want to do is you just want to make sure you're watching your bar and always have this move on cooldown. It gives you damage rating, critical hit rating, critical damage rating. It restores 20% of your maximum momentum per second. And the buff duration is 8 seconds. Once again, it's unaffected by any kind of power duration buff you can get from like Dr. Doom's Medallion and so forth, for example. The cooldown is 30 seconds. It does share a cooldown with the Wrath of Sidorak, which is another buff that I don't use. So, and we're going to max out Scion of Sidorak, and it gives me 6 points left over, and I put the 6 points in Don't You Know Who I Am. So that completes the. Let me confirm that. So that completes my completes my build here that I use to get by the cosmic trial. Let me go ahead and recap. I use stride maxed out. I use big elbow drop maxed out. Unstoppable charge maxed. I use crimson force field maxed out. I use don't you know who I am. I do not have that maxed. I use Scion of Sidorak. That's maxed out. Human Juggernaut is maxed out, and Lariat is maxed out. So that's all my powers, and I'll just go over them a little bit here. I don't have my team up out right now. There's two. Let me talk about the team up for a second before I talk. Actually, let me talk about the resource first. As you can see, I'm standing still, and down here my resource bar is 0. Anytime you move Juggernaut, you just move the character. See, the momentum builds. So I'm going to do more damage while the momentum's building. So you'll always want to be moving. If I sit still, I'm going to be losing momentum. So you don't want to sit still during battles. You never want to stop. And I'll let the momentum die down a little bit more here. If you stride, see how fast it gains. And you move about 5 times faster, and that's the good way to build your momentum. Now you can also build your momentum by using the Lariat, but it doesn't build it quite as fast. I'd say it builds it about half as fast. Both are good, but I like to use stride in between attacks. So let me go over here. I think I've already killed all the sparring targets there. Let me go here. There's Scion of Sidorak. You can hit your signature, which is unstoppable charge. I've got maximum momentum. As you can see, I didn't even really have to hit the target dummy. See how it's doing less damage. There's a decent brutal because I have 0 momentum. But if I hit stride really fast and then attack, there's a bigger brutal. You get a bigger brutal strike. Now if I build it, now I have Scion of Sidorak going, my buff. Now I'm going to get, there's a crit. Let me see if I can get a bigger crit here. There's one. There's a 3.3 million. That's not too bad. So that's basically the gist of playing Juggernaut. You can also spam your force field, and here's the area taunt. Area taunt right here. It's an 8-second debuff, and it'll taunt the enemies to come after you. Here's the level 60 DPS target dummy. He's dead. Juggernaut's not. He's kind of in between. He's okay against single targets. Not as good as some of the other. Maybe not as good as some of the other characters against single targets, but against maybe 3 or 4 elites, he's really good. Any kind of mobs, you can one-shot a lot of mobs with Juggernaut using the elbow drop. Just make sure you have Scion of Sidorak going, and make sure your momentum is fully charged. So that about does it for Juggernaut on his power tree. Now let's look at the team up here. There's really 2 options, I think, for Juggernaut for the team up that I use. You can use Angel. You can summon Angel if you prefer to have your team up fight alongside of you, and you don't want to put them you don't want to set them to away. Angel's kind of the way to go. because Angel has a move, if I can find it here. Angel has a move called Angelic Blessing. It says Angel blesses you, increasing your speed and the damage of your movement powers. And gives me plus 3.8% move speed and attack speed. And it also gives me movement power base damage of plus 9.5%. The buff duration is 10 seconds. And there is a cooldown of 30 seconds. So that's one way to go if you prefer to have your team up fight alongside of you. Another way to go, let me dismiss him here. Another way to go with Juggernaut is Wasp. Let me bring up Wasp here and set her active on Juggernaut. And if you're playing with Wasp and Juggernaut, what you want to do is set her away. If you set her away, what happens is the effect is you get base damage plus 20% for 2 seconds when you use a movement power. The assist duration is 30 seconds. Says effects are not active while Wasp is in play. So, you know, this is a good way to go if you don't mind playing your character without a team up, you know, out and actually, you know, actively fighting on you know, by your side. If you don't mind just using your team up as like a passive, Wasp is definitely the way to go. I personally like to have the team up out. It's just more fun to play that way, in my opinion. But you know, maybe doing raid when I'm in a raid, I normally, you know, I'm out in Midtown or Cosmic Midtown, and I'm just doing the dailies and you know, legendaries and stuff like that. I'll probably use Angel, but when I'm in a raid, a lot of times I'll switch to Wasp just to get that extra 20% damage to the movement powers for 2 seconds. Doesn't seem like a lot, 2 seconds, but you can really tell a difference when you do some brutal and critical strikes. So that's basically the two options that, in my opinion, are best for Juggernaut. So let's go ahead and look at my gear for Juggernaut. The actual the gear, I mean, you're okay to use all of Juggernaut's specified gear. I've got everything at level 69. I've got the attack speed, plus 2% attack speed, and I also have tenacity. I also build up tenacity because remember, the higher tenacity rating when you're using this ability, this passive can't be stopped. You get 75% critical rating. Is 75% of your tenacity rating. You get a like right now I have plus 2022.8 for 10 seconds when you use a power. It says this rating is equal to 75% of your tenacity rating. So tenacity, definitely want to build tenacity with Juggernaut. So I use all of his specified uniques except one. I use Shocker's Vibro Shock Gauntlets. And the reason I do that, it's physical damage. It gives you physical defense. Gives you some crit. Gives you some brutal strike. When your health drops below 30%, you gain defense rating and tenacity for 5 seconds, which is kind of nice. You also have the roll I have on this one is a 14% chance when you're attacked to create a shield that absorbs damage with a 10-second cooldown. Plus, it gives me attack speed and extra tenacity. So it's just something I threw on. You don't have to use this, but I do like the shield. The extra shield goes off quite a bit. Now it only takes up to like 2,300 damage, and it's got a 10-second cooldown. But it's kind of nice having that extra shield that procs a lot. 14% is pretty high, so it goes off quite a bit. But you don't have to use that. I believe he's got a unique, the hammer. The hammer in slot 1 will do just fine. I just kind of wanted to mix it up a little bit and use some of those different any hero uniques because I don't use a whole lot of those. So the legendary got a level 80 McCran crystal. That's a must for Juggernaut. It's a no-brainer. Gives you momentum, gives you health, gives you damage rating, crit rating. It says it 5.5% chance on hit to restore 100 momentum and deal 400,000 energy damage to any enemies with a 20-second cooldown. So McCran Crystal, so you can get the extra momentum. That's always a plus. For the relic, I use Relic of Scrollos. You can also use the Relic of Gibberum, which I think I'm pronouncing that right. Relic of Gibberum gives you momentum, extra momentum, or you can use the Relic of Scrollos, which gives you extra tenacity. So, like I said, tenacity is important for Juggernaut. You can use either one of those. For the Uru Forged, I use Unstoppable Force. I use a rating to melee powers. Melee power enhanced Uru Forged. You can also use physical. You can also use the one that grants you physical damage. With the Unstoppable Force, says you have 2% chance when you hit with a movement power to gain 200 critical rating and 2,000 crit damage for 5 seconds. Gives you move speed, crit hit rating, buffs your damage rating to movement powers, minus 2% momentum cost, that's big, and it gives you physical damage rating, and it gives you move speed, so that's kind of nice. With the ring, anything that you can buff physical damage, I have plus movement speed, fighting, and speed. I'll probably upgrade my ring. Just whatever decent ring you can find is okay. For the pet, I'm using the remote control Blackbird. I didn't really know of a better pet to use for Juggernaut. It really, it's X-Men related. So I use the insignia, Cosmic Insignia of Juggernaut, Thunderbolt's Insignia. It gives you plus melee damage, plus tenacity, and plus defense for 8 seconds. When you hit with any power, you and your allies gain that. I also have a regenerate health and brutal strike rating on that. I'm sure there's some other good insignias that you can use for Juggernaut. You don't have to use the insignia of Juggernaut. Yeah, he's talking to me here. For my artifacts, I use the Gem of the Cursed with the Blessing of Hela, with the brutal strike chance. I use the Blessed Armor Issued Nano Poison. The medallion, I use the Curse Medallion, which I'm not sure if that's the best medallion to use for Juggernaut. Maybe something better. This physical damage, physical defense, gives you damage rating to all melee attacks, brutal strike, critical hit rating to melee attacks. There may be one better, but I've just been using Curse Medallion. You might be able to use the Juggernaut Medallion as well. That's something I might check into. I use the Black Cat's Advanced Grappling Hook. Gives you +1 fighting, plus damage versus bosses, dodge rating, crit hit rating, move speed, and mostly it gives you damage rating to movement powers. So that's important. And I also use the Mobile Lab Kit. It's an artifact out of the Danger Room. It says you recover 22.2 momentum when you hit with a movement power with a 2-second cooldown. It regenerates health back when you hit with a movement power. It gives you plus damage rating to movement powers. Gives you plus health and plus tenacity. So I think that one is a no-brainer. There may be some better. You might be able to use a Gorilla Necklace. I was using Hyde's formula on Juggernaut for the longest time. It did just fine. So that's about it for what I can talk about with the Juggernaut. As you can see, my stats, I have his fighting and durability, kind of important. You don't really, I've got the speed up there a little bit too. You don't really need energy. You don't need energy for Juggernaut. You can always buff intelligence, somehow. When I use the Omegas, For the Omegas, you can. They're about ready to change the entire Omega system a little bit. I mean, they're not changing the entire, but they're adding some to it, and they're making it easier for newer players to gain Omega points more quickly. What I use for Omegas, I use a 10. I maxed out Frenzy, which these will be changing, so I really don't even need to go over that. It's in the mutation tree. I use Frenzy. When you hit with a melee power, you gain critical damage rating for 10 seconds. I also use I missed one here. I use Harpy. You gain a critical hit and brutal strike when you hit with a melee power. Just anything that busts from physical damage or melee power just is good to use for Juggernaut on the Omegas. Spin Tech. I use Deathlock program for damage rating to physical attacks. I use the Tech Ops Cybernetic Body Upgrade. Gives me physical defense and damage rating to physical attacks. And the Reaver program plus 10% base physical damage. So there's kind of a pattern forming there. So anything, like I said, anything that buffs the physical damage is fine. And that's right now. That's about all I have for the Juggernaut. You know, like I said, he's a lot of fun to play. You got to always keep moving. You always have to stay active. He's terrible range. I don't use any range abilities, so you know that can kind of be a detriment a little bit in certain situations. But he can take a beating. He's got a lot of shields. You know, he's really durable. He can take a beating, and he does fairly good damage to gruesome enemies. He's not super great against single target. I mean, the signature against single target is decent, but he's not super great against single target. But I would definitely recommend playing him. He was one of my first main characters that I got through the Cosmic Trial, and it was a breeze. Once I learned the rotation and you know, the good build on him, the Cosmic Gate was no problem whatsoever. It was pretty much a joke. I've talked to some people that said they had a hard time doing enough damage, but just keep the Scion of Sidorak going, and just keep spamming the signature and the elbow drop. Shouldn't have any problem. So anyway, guys, thanks for watching the video. Like the video if you want, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to catch some more Marvel hero builds. So until next time, I will talk to you guys later.